Chapter 25. Captivity Day 27. Samari. After arriving at the Dew star system and scouting the border to the slipstream, Oleander's fleet had been unable to find the path through the nebula which led to the clearing where the Kirame resided. Gauri had been sent to rendezvous with the fleet and guide them in. With her they found the path, but they weren't going anywhere. This territory belonged to the Cletharian horde. Unlike the women he was used to dealing with, he wasn't welcome within their domain. She wondered if it would be easier if she'd reclaimed her queen's mark, but the old queen said the collective's trust couldn't simply be given, it must be earned. None of that would matter until they could recognize her as their queen. She stood in the middle of the Star Lounge, keeping Louis calm while the ship alarms blared. Oleander's capital ship, his 50 longbow-class starships, and all the support ships were being targeted. This was simply Cletharia's way of letting someone know they're unwelcome. The psionic force generated by Horde's combined thoughts rumbled through the star view screen. The Weavers couldn't unite their minds into a single song, not without a queen to guide them. There was something else out there, within those clouds. She could feel it the same sort of way she could sense Louis's thoughts and feelings as he stood beside her. Although her abilities were different, the presence was familiar. Samari didn't have the nearly limitless range she'd enjoyed in the body she once shared with Kivaza, so what she was feeling had to be their psyches reaching out for hers. But who, or what were they? She could feel it. They knew her, but how? Sam accessed her contact list using a control on her right earring. It displayed on her contact lenses. She was still getting used to the interface. As long as she didn't think about what she was doing, it made perfect sense. Oleander accepted the call while continuing to address his bridge crew. Things were tense up there. The ships were being scanned, and the target tracking software was adjusting constantly. "Can you open a channel for me?" Sam said eagerly. "We are a little busy." "They're getting frustrated," Sam said urgently. "I need to talk to them." "They're getting frustrated," Oleander balked. "All channels are open. I hope you know what you're doing." "So do I," she whispered under her breath while resting her hand on Louis's shoulder as if using him as an anchor. She spoke as loudly and clearly as she could, while thinking through the same ability she used to communicate with Louis. "For the servant of the soul, link these worlds to and fro. Grant passage from where stars light, through your ancient might." Samari winced. She'd missed a beat. "I'm so sorry," Sam whimpered. "I messed up that last line, but I don't know how bad. Can you ask the fleet not to move?" "Sure," Oleander snickered. "I'll just tell them to stop drifting and not make any course corrections." "Wait, we're getting a reply," one of the women on the bridge said. "It was nice serving with all of you." Louis trembled while the thoughts of a fragment of the horde flowed past them both. Now it has come to be revealed. Shadows follow at the rear, shadows of the tree smile, singing of the dead with pride. She could hear him barking orders to the fleet. They were preparing for a tactical withdrawal while minimizing losses. "Stop," Samari yelled. "They're not going to attack." "Stop yelling, you tried." "They're not listening," Oleander said, then returned his attention to the fleet. "Not them, you," Samari roared. "They asked us to follow them in. They want to show us something, like a child desperate to impress a parent. Just the ship we are on, for now. Leave the rest of the fleet at Dew Star or something. If they decide they're willing to let more ships in, they'll let us know." "How did you get that from their message?" Oleander said, without reducing the fleet's alert status. "Cletharia isn't just one species. Those were the Darklings speaking. The edge of the nebula is already getting lighter. They're pulling back the shadows. They're inviting us in. They're going to follow us in to keep the rest of the collective calm. I'm pretty sure the tree is referring to the array. It kinda looks like one from the right angle. They killed something, And they're eager to show us, Sam yelled over the blaring sirens. Turn off all this noise, please. The lights continued flashing, but the sound cut off. I was wondering why you were screaming, Oleander chuckled. I forgot Red Alert silent mode has to be set manually for non-critical areas. Sorry about that. I'm heading up to the bridge, and I'm bringing Louis with me, Sam growled. Be prepared for another slap. I may tell Louis to do it, he hits harder. All critical areas are under security lockdown, Oleander said. Give me the elevator number once you're on, and we'll have you brought here. I'm starting to think you're looking forward to being slapped, Sam teased as she led Louis onto the elevator. He didn't respond. You okay? Sam asked while echoing the thought in Louis's mind. He bobbed his head. She provided Oleander with the elevator number and let her mind wander as they sped to their destination. The preliminary tests to gauge intellect were by use of psionic scans, attempts at verbal communication, and whether or not they'd established some sort of culture. Sam didn't care what anyone thought. Louis was a lot smarter than he was letting on. Would the researcher have interpreted pretending to be a simpler creature as an advantageous survival tactic? She wanted to help Louis's people become recognized for the beings she was convinced they really were, but that would take time, and she had much more pressing matters to deal with. It was naive of her to think the Cletherians would simply accept a rival fleet into their territory. They'd been treated as enemies to the entire galaxy for eons. They've been here as long as the Gyrons. They were there to witness the rise and fall of hundreds of nations, including Eldarin. They withstood 2 interspecies wars, both galactic wars, and the Colmeon War. Before the first histories were recorded, there was Cletheria. They evolved in a reality beyond the boundaries of Corallus. They've stood before Rashray, strode through the stars alongside the Shakiri, and felt the death of the last Jani. From their perspective, even the Lamentics were children in their playground. She wanted to find a way to encourage the collective to cooperate with the Lamentics, the third oldest extant species, as a first step in pulling back the veil of ignorance blinding the younger races to the splendor of this ancient empire. If they only knew that within the shell of each weaver resides a biological marvel, dozens of complete biospheres preserving species long believed to be lost, buried by the sands of time. Left alone, in peace, Cletherians were wise, playful, and protective. Unfortunately, they were most often met by provocation and betrayal. Much like Tyrell, they preferred not to be bothered, but nobody seemed willing to do that. Least of all her. Samari smiled to herself as she walked onto the command deck and started down the hallway to the battle bridge. As long as everyone was able to get along with their neighbors, it should be possible for the fleet to run through training drills. The majority of the Cletherian horde was still on its way back, making this an ideal time to start building bridges. Beyond the future of the collective, Samari had her own ulterior motives. As soon as the Karzan's war began, the remaining pygmies would be leaving. Once the first major battle had concluded, Gowry would finally be free to pursue Syntholo. That would just leave Tyrell to maintain the Keyray array. The twins would still be there, but they weren't very good company for someone like him. Oleander's capital ship was a special case. The rest of the fleet were more customary military vessels. Samari hoped some of the crew would request to help support the array. She'd be willing to negotiate limited access to the Lamentic Empire if they assisted Tyrell and the kids in not going stir-crazy, if nothing else. The Cletherians protected the region without being asked, so that's not a major concern. Long before any of that could happen, she needed to find a way to convince the Cletherians to allow the Armada into their territory. You can look around, Sam thought to Louis as he followed her into the room. Try not to get in the way. He huffed quietly, then went his own way as Samari headed straight for Oleander. Oleander was standing in front of a tactical display screen, his arms folded, with a quirky smile on his face. "Samari," he teased, "did you decide to hit me yourself? Pick a cheek." She advanced on his position, her legs swinging like pendulums, her hands clasped at her sides. She was doing her best to look furious and aggressive, but his smile never wavered. Why do Lamentics have to be so damn tall? She thought irritably. He was a full head taller than her. Sam's body was just an inch or two shorter than Carly's, but she always walked on the balls of her feet. That gave her another 3 inches of height, reducing the difference between Carly and Cyan to about 3 inches. Oleander was a little taller than Cyan. Oleander took a knee as Samari got close so she wouldn't have to reach up to slap him. Samari marched forward, stood straddling his knee, and gave him a kiss dead on the lips. "Admiral," one of the women said forcefully, "there's movement outside." "That's not the only place," he said softly as he pulled his lips away from Sam's and looked at the screen. Sam stepped back and stood quietly, with her hips slowly swaying as he directed the crew to take the ship into the channel through the nebula the Darkling had made. "I thought you wanted to hurt me," he taunted. "I know how to hurt you," Samari goaded. "I'm still bleeding. Maybe tomorrow." "Yeah," he grumbled, "that hurts. I'm just going to sit and watch while you slide this long ship through that tight." "Stop that," he growled. Samari giggled, and was surprised to hear a couple of the women in the crew joined in. A spiraling wall of shadow moved with them as they slowly followed Gary's ship toward the hollow hidden in the nebula. It took several hours to navigate the massive, wedge-shaped ship safely into Cletherian space. Samari watched excitedly as the last of the shadows peeled away. The key rame stood before her. She had finally come home. Sam had deluded herself into believing that once she arrived here, she could just step back into her old life and pick up right where she left off. Everything was different. Everything felt wrong. Even the shape of the array had changed. Tyrell must have done some major remodeling. No, not Tyrell. She felt isolated, detached. Louis rushed to her side and grabbed onto her hand. He must have seen the pained look on her face. It took time to fully process what she was seeing. An iridescent silvery white mass was tangled among the assorted array sections as the vast tendrils inched around the central shaft of the superstructure. The compartments were moved through space, realigned, reconfigured, and reconnected, like building blocks for an immense child. "What happened to you?" Sam whispered. She could remember that the twins fed the baby Weaver a changeling mutation core, and how furious it made her. Is that what the Weaver became? The former queen charged her with this creature's care. It had no shell, no compartments to contain biomes. It was completely unrecognizable. It had gone from an orphan, whose mother had sacrificed itself to protect her, to something completely new. The old queen had played her role sculpting the future of Corallus throughout the ages. Was this just another part of her grand tapestry, or a herald of the next age of Corallus? Only time would tell. Sam wished she could see it with the eyes of an Elderani. The final verse of riddled infinity never seemed to fit. A new tree planted, and guardian made. "Oleander," Sam said in a distant tone, "remind me, what does my name mean in its native language?" "It means Akia can't spell Samsaran words," he snickered. She insisted it meant guardian. "Not with an E at the end, it doesn't." "Why?" "No reason," Samari smiled. The ship pulled up next to the array. A docking clamp latched onto the capital ship. "Come on, Louis," Sam said while leading him toward the hallway. "I'll meet you two at the airlock," Oleander called to her, then returned his attention to making arrangements to arrange a tour of the ship for Tyrell. The original Samari must have spent some time on this ship, but she couldn't rely on instinct to find her way to the airlock. She managed to get thoroughly lost in the bowels of the ship before being scolded for wandering around a maintenance deck. The weapon subsystems had to be serviced periodically and ran hot. If she'd opened the wrong one, she and Louis might have gotten a bit crispy. The maintenance woman was nice enough to guide them to the correct airlock, while telling Sam all about the harness she wore while working in extremely hot hull compartments. It could be a way to bring the twins off the station safely, which piqued Sam Mari's interest. She'd have to discuss it later with Oleander before they left for Hyrule. Tyrell and Oleander were standing in the open airlock which connected the ship and station as she arrived. "Sorry," Sam blushed. "I got a little lost." She thanked the maintenance woman and rushed over to join them, with Louis trailing a couple steps behind her. "Hey Tyrell, what do you think of the new me?" Sam Mari giggled as she spun around a few feet from him. "Are you sure that's her?" Tyrell motioned to her with his thumb, while looking to Oleander. "Cyanide says it is. If you have doubts, bring them to her, not me," Oleander teased. "I just got here and you're already picking on me," Sam pouted. "This one is too bouncy." "Nope, definitely not her," Tyrell grinned. "Look, they're even smiling. Stop screwing with an old man and bring out the real Lady Darkseid." Sam crossed her arms, pitched her right hip to the side and said, "I'm not laughing." "There you are," Tyrell laughed. "Welcome back, Kayla." "It's Sam Mari now," she said sternly. "Sam for short." Oleander motioned down the interconnecting hallway. "Tyrell, enjoy your tour, and don't forget what we discussed." "I will," Tyrell chuckled. "Just make sure to get me that intel before you leave." "What was he talking about?" Sam Mari asked as two women led Tyrell away. "He's been trying to arrange a dinner date with Jean Lavro, and wanted me to let him know what sort of flowers she likes and where he can send them. Nothing important." "Wow," Sam said. "I guess a lot has changed around here." Sam hesitantly stepped across the docking seal onto the key rame. "Is something wrong?" Oleander asked as he stepped past her onto the station. "I don't know," she answered. "I just don't know. I lived on the Regicide one for months. I didn't live at the Array for that long. I expected this to feel like coming home, but it doesn't. I can't just walk back into a life that was only half mine to begin with. I just feel like an imposter." Louis pushed his head into her back. She turned to her side and rested her hand on his head. "It's okay," Sam said. "You can go explore. Just don't cause any problems." "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Oleander asked as they watched Louis wander away. "He'll be fine. He's not just some animal. After the first soul transference, he talked to me, or maybe that was just me trying to get a feel for my new samsara and mental abilities. He's loyal and smart. He's getting better at understanding what I'm saying, but he can't communicate." Oleander grinned broadly. "Maybe you'd have better luck with a different language." He stepped in close. "I'm not as sore but still bloody, sticky and—" Sam Mari pouted. "I'm in no rush," Oleander soothed. "Why don't you show me around for a while? The walk may do us both some good." "You better not rush," Sam said as she started down the hallway with a little extra sway in her hips. "Don't worry about that," he said as he walked just far enough behind her to enjoy the show. "I plan on taking my time with you." Sam Mari was soaking up his attention like a sponge, knowing it wouldn't last. They only had a few days to accomplish all her objectives before he leaves with his fleet. "I really want to see the twins," Sam sighed as they walked down the corridor to the station core. "I'm just scared. I'm their mother. Well, I'm one of their mother's souls. They won't know me, not looking like this. The baby weaver doesn't know me, and won't until I reclaim my queen's mark. If Shelley doesn't recognize my mind." "You can try explaining it to them," Oleander said, "or just tell them you're their mother's sister." "But I'm not just their aunt," Sam frowned. I'm as much their mother as she is. I just don't look like her. They lost their real parents. I don't want to put them through that again. What if Kivasa never comes back? I had two mothers. Why can't they? Samari led him onto a platform which would lower them to the main loading dock. It's not my decision to make, Oleander said. I'm not sure it's yours either. It's their choice. Most Lamentic children are raised by multiple houses. As they get older, they're given more and more choices. I don't know what your boys are like, or if they're mature enough, but eventually they will have to decide what they want. It's not that simple. They both have a congenital defect. They can't live among their own people. If they hadn't been born with knacks, they wouldn't have survived. Normal Jar-Galtim can't survive at temperatures above -100 degrees. These two are uncomfortable but safe at 0. The woman who showed me to the airlock was wearing a harness to protect her from the heat. Do you know if they make something like that the twins could wear? I hate having to leave them behind. Who do you think makes those harnesses? Oleander smiled. Jar-Galtim make the best cooling systems in Corallus. Those were made for a culturally symbiotic sub-Terran thrall species. They're found near the Alizia star system, I think. I'd be happy to ask my girls if they can rig something up with our surplus units if you want to bring the kids with us to the Havras system. Samari grabbed onto his coat and pulled herself against his chest, raised up onto the tips of her toes and asked excitedly, "Would you really do that for me?" Let me think, Oleander mused. Would I ask someone else to do extra work just to make you smile at me like that? I don't see why not. Thank you, Sam squealed while bouncing on her toes. Samari, Oleander said harshly as he put his hands on her shoulders, holding her still. Let's not start that again. Start what? Sam asked. The bouncy excited. It just happened, Sam blushed. Did that used to be a thing? Just don't, he said curtly. You're not the old Samari anymore. If you keep acting like her, I may lose track of that. I'd prefer not to spend all our time together expecting Akia's wrath. That brought back an interesting memory, Sam said. The platform had nearly completed its descent. A good one, I hope, Oleander said, then asked. Wait, whose memory? Mixed. Sam shrugged. I don't have a full set of memories from either, so it was jumbled. It was hard to tell who I was remembering being. I was worried about Akia catching me in some parts, and my mother, Flair, in others. Did we almost do something once, or was that? That's weird. I don't remember his name. If I used to be Kayla, why don't I remember her brother's name? I remember everyone else's names, but not his. I wonder why. I can tell their eyes are always silver or grey, and they have ocean blue hair, but my memory can't settle on the hue. I can't see his features. It's a little different every time I try to remember them. Them, Oleander observed, not him. I don't know why I said that, Samari shrugged. We can talk about it later if you'd like, Oleander said as the platform came to rest. The twins were watching them intensely. Decision time. A gentle breeze carried Oleander's words past her ear. She wanted to run and hug them both, but they didn't look excited or happy. They looked angry. Hey, can we talk? Samari said nervously as she stepped off the platform. Yari's left arm twitched with his thumb angled upward. His head tilted slightly to the right, and his shoulders straight. Zeku's stance lowered slightly. His shoulders swayed from side to side as he moved his left arm behind his back and rotated. Be careful, Sam said over her shoulder. They want to play. Instinct took over. She bent her legs, her upper body slid right, and her hips slid left as she looked forward, and a snowball sailed past her ear. She heard the thump of it hitting Oleander. Trained defender, Oleander laughed. Not yours, Samari yelled while dancing her way through a hail of snowballs. Zeku had learned a new trick. A mound of snow was forming behind him, flowing out of his left hand, while he balled up and flung clods of snow with his right. Yari was swiping at the mound two-handed, throwing dense clumps of compacted snow. No ice, Samari barked. He started it, Zaku said indignantly, while pointing behind her. Oleander! Samari scolded while twirling to face him. Oleander was holding a shield and a sword conjured from ice. Zaku had tricked. A dense snowball hit her left leg, a second hit her on the ass, and an instant later she felt a third slam into the back of her head. Not my mama, Yari sneered as Sam slammed into the floor. She'd become the victim of her own competence. In her old body, with her old ability set, they'd never managed to get the best of her. This had been their test, and she'd failed spectacularly. She'd fell for a simple and obvious ruse. She heard heavy footsteps plodding away. Sam! Oleander rushed to her, knelt beside her, and placed his hand on her shoulder. Are you okay? She could hear crashing noises in the distance. It sounded like Yari was having a tantrum with his Kobe Tamj fully active. No, Sam sobbed. I'm not injured, but I've always had to hold back so I don't hurt them. This body is so much weaker than my old one. I shouldn't have held back. He pulled her up off the floor into his embrace. They rejected me, she whimpered into his shoulder. I was better off when my mind was still dormant, trapped in my old body. I can't even play with my kids like this. I knew I wouldn't be able to wrestle with them, but I can't even hold my own in a snowball fight. The woman you inherited your new body from was a healer, translator, and a defender. It's a totally different set of skills. You just need time to adjust. His word choice seemed strange. Why didn't you just put a force barrier between you and them? Oleander asked. Then they couldn't hit you at all. That's no fun, Sam pouted. That's cheating. Different muscles. Zaku asked from somewhere behind her. See, they didn't both run off, Oleander soothed. Yes, Zaku, she said without turning to look. My special muscles are strong in a different way now. I'm looking forward to a demonstration of your special muscles, Oleander whispered, grossly underestimating Zaku's hearing. I want to see too, Zaku said excitedly. They both have different forms of enhanced awareness, Sam hissed. Yari through Kobe Tamj, and Zaku over here uses mystrionics, don't you? We are mages, Zaku said proudly. That's nice, Oleander smiled flatly. I'm a fleet admiral. Don't do that, Samari said as she pushed back from him, stood, straightened her stance, and rolled her shoulders back. She's mad, Zaku scowled. Why did the man lie? Samari cut off Oleander before he could object. Oleander was trying to make a joke. You said your knack rank, he answered with his military rank. It wasn't a good joke, Zaku said sadly. The muscles in his shoulders twitched on one side then the other. Zargal team use different body language, keep that in mind, Sam giggled. Most of their communication isn't verbal. Samari held her hand with her little finger flat against her stomach, closed her finger with her thumb straight out, and raised her shoulder. Zaku reached out and took hold of Oleander in one of his hands, wrapping his fingers around the Lamentic's torso, lifted him effortlessly, and raised him on gently to his feet. Sam was delighted by the look of shock in Oleander's eyes, and the satisfaction in Zaku's posture. I think we got off on the wrong foot, Oleander said as he held out his hand. Zaku shuffled his feet from side to side while rotating his wrists by his sides. Be nice, Sam scolded. What did I do now? Oleander said in frustration. Not you, him, Sam smirked. Mama, Zaku asked sheepishly, can I have a hug? Sam's eyes teared up. Of course, you can, Samari said as she disappeared into his long white fur and wrapped her arms around him as tightly as she could. He placed his black scaly hand against her back, and lowered his reptilian head until his flat chin came to rest on top of her head. "I missed you, Mama," Zaku whimpered. "I missed you both so much," Sam bawled. "You gave better hugs with tails," Zaku said sadly. "I know," Sam said, her voice choked with tears. She heard the sound of claws clicking against the metal floor rapidly approaching. "Look out," Oleander though to her urgently. "She's not Mama," Yari roared. Zaku pulled her out from his fur and held her away from him, toward Oleander. Zaku pulled her out from his fur and held her away from him, toward Oleander, at arm's length, while trying to defend himself against his own brother. Sam jumped back as Yari's long claws scored the side of Zaku's face, sending a ribbon of blood sailing toward her. His blood scorched her shoulder. Sam jumped back as Yari's long claws scored the side of Zaku's face, sending a ribbon of blood sailing toward her. His blood scorched her shoulder and forearm. Sam winced as Oleander grabbed onto her, moving her out of the way while pulling moisture from the air to wash the smoldering blood from her tender flesh. "Stop," Samari screeched as the brothers traded open-handed blows, their claws streaking each other's fur with bloody stripes. Kobe Tamj was a superior talent for close combat, giving Yari a significant advantage. Oleander took out a small case containing a row of earrings with colored gemstones. "Don't you dare hurt them," Sam growled as he reached for the red stone. They already hurt you, he said defensively. I said no, Samari yelled. He moved his finger to a yellow stone. Okay, electricity instead of fire. I'll try not to injure them. They're not just children, Sam snapped. They're my children. If she was going to break up the fight, she needed to be able to concentrate. She traced her fingers up her arm and shoulder, shivering involuntarily as healing energies flowed into her. Blood droplets smoldered, splattered haphazardly across the decking. She'd seen them play rough before, but this wasn't play. You're brothers, Sam yelled. Stop fighting. A wall of ice coalesced between them, absorbing most of the impact of one of Yari's blows. The ice shattered. Yari swung both of his arms up behind him and stomped his feet. Zaku clapped his hands together. A wedge of ice began spreading between his palms as he pulled them apart. It was too slow. Yari's left foot struck his brother's right knee, making a sickening pop as his right arm shattered the ice, and his left spun down toward Yari's head with all the weight and momentum of his body behind it. A bolt of lightning shot past her, striking Yari. His body convulsed momentarily, just long enough to interrupt his swing. Sam muttered quietly while rotating her finger. Zaku hobbled back, away from his brother with his hands held defensively in front of him. Yari jumped into the air, both hands clasped together in a fist, with the claws on his feet outstretched. Samari twirled her hand as she completed the incantation. Yari thumped into an invisible barrier, and frantically tried to smash his way free of the floating force bubble he'd been contained within. I said stop, Samari roared as she stormed over to them, carefully avoiding the patches of toxic blood. What's gotten into you? Look at your brother. You're both hurt, but you might have broken his knee. Sam let the sphere containing Yari settle onto the floor. He was still trying to escape from his confinement. Zaku was sitting on the floor holding his knee, whimpering. Yari was seething with rage. I don't care how upset you are at me. Apologize to your brother. No, Yari snarled. You're not Mama. You can cool down while I take a look at your brother's injuries. Samari adjusted the atmospheric conditions within the force bubble and turned her attention to Zaku. The memories of Sam's life seemed to float to the surface whenever she was too stressed or distracted to think. Oleander's box of earrings was from the Black Church. Each of them contained a different elemental catalyst stone. He had the full set: fire, ice, water, air, sonic, earth, electricity, and light. Those were the names used by the church, although they weren't accurate. Earth, water, and air actually dealt with the three primary states of matter. Fire and ice dealt with the vibratory speed of atoms. Light was inclusive of the absence thereof, and so on. Switching which stone rested between his Mystrium studs changed which element he could manipulate in conjunction with his more complex abilities. She took her hands away from Zaku's knee to inspect her handiwork. The hairline fracture had mended nicely. She called over Oleander to help wash the blood out of his fur, and see if there were any cuts which hadn't been sealed by her regenerative aura. Sam really did have a useful set of healing abilities. It must have taken her years to develop them all. Snow globe, Zaku laughed, pointing toward Yari. Sam looked over at the spherical force barrier. She'd over-adjusted the environmental conditions inside the field. It was snowing in there. While not her intention, it seemed to have calmed him down. Are you going to let me patch you up? Samari asked. Okay, Yari grumbled. No more tantrums, she said sternly. Fine, he snorted, but you're still not my mama. We're all going to have a talk about that later. Sam rolled her eyes. She dispelled the sphere. Mama. Zaku asked, is it my turn to play in the snow globe now? Why not? Sam smiled and shrugged. While Oleander washed off Yari's fur, Samari formed a climate-controlled bubble around Zaku, who proceeded to run in the ball, making it roll around the room with him. "This isn't fair," Yari complained as she tended his injuries. "Why does he get to play while that hurt?" "That's just a bruised rib," Samari scoffed. "You did worse to his knee. You might have killed him if Oleander didn't time that zap as well as he did. How many times do I have to tell you to be careful? You play too rough. Kobe Tamj makes you faster and hit harder. You weren't even playing. You were angry and didn't care who got hurt." "Did I do that?" Yari asked as he touched the discolored patch of new skin on her shoulder. "Don't you dare even think about apologizing to me before you've told your brother you're sorry," Sam hissed. "If we hadn't stopped you, you wouldn't have a brother anymore. You can't lose your temper like that. I know I taught you better than that. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should." "I'm sorry," he burst into tears while looking down at her with a quivering jaw. Samari pointed at Zaku. "I'm sorry, Zaku," he wailed. His brother was too busy rolling around in the force field ball giggling while bouncing off of shipping crates to hear him. "Tell him again when he's less distracted," Sam said again while smacking the back of her hand against his injured ribs. From his reaction, she could tell they were still a little sore. She'd healed the rest of his injuries fully, but thought the discomfort would serve as a more enduring reminder of the consequences of losing his temper. "Bubble," Yari pleaded. Samari smirked, then made a climate-controlled sphere of force for him too. "That was exhausting," Samari sighed, as Yari rolled away to play with his brother. Oleander sat down on the floor next to her. "Are you all right?" "They're lucky their necks are too wide to strangle," Sam grumbled. "Come here," he chuckled as he pulled her into his lap and wrapped his arms around her. They sat together watching the brothers play bumper balls as if they hadn't been ready to beat each other to death just a little while earlier. And just like that, Oleander quipped, "All is forgotten. I wish Virile could forgive that quickly." "Don't delude yourself," Sam scoffed. "This is going to be brought up every time they argue. I imagine them having kids someday who are sick of hearing about this and every other fight they ever have. His tour is over. He's invited some of my crew to visit the station for a while. Do you mind?" "No, but they might," Samari giggled. "He records everything." "You're talking about my crew," he snickered. "If they find out about that, they'd be more likely to torment him than complain." Samari leaned back into his embrace as they relaxed, watching the boys play.